have you been, Damon? How was been a while here. How was your holidays and all of that?
Well, we had the usual coughs and colds. We went. One of Kate's cousins very kindly lent us a house in Norfolk on the coast by the sea, in a little village, which is the birthplace of Admiral Lord Nelson. So we were up there on the sea, on the coast. So we had Christmas on the coast. That was all great with the seals and very very different change of scene. Very very cold. I
Yeah.
always think of Maine as a very cold sort of place. So it might have been, it might have been the equivalent to going to Maine, maybe. Um,
Weather's kind of similar, yeah. Maybe not as rainy, but if you look, I mean, even if I guess if you look on the globe, like kind of the lateral lines, it's almost like parts of the U.S. are almost identical with those island, yeah, the UK islands with some of that, at least the northern northeastern
right.
parts of Canada. Like I guess that's why they called it New England when they came there. It was kind of the same weather, kind of the same terrain. It was yeah, same part of the globe, at least on just on the other side of it.
And
That's fantastic. No,
in
please.
Nevada, did you have Christmas in Nevada?
We did, yeah, we did, and it was good. It was a good Christmas. We had family come in. Uh, my parents came and stayed with us for a week, and yeah, it was a good time. It was a good time. They do the New Year's is big here as well. You know, on the strip they do the fireworks, and we usually don't go down there just because it's so crowded. At least with my daughter and stuff, she's little. We just it's just so much congestion. They shut the strip down, so there's
Right.
no through traffic on Las Vegas Boulevard, and so they just let people walk into the street, and drink and stuff like that. So it's more of like an adult New Year's Eve. So we didn't take my daughter down there, but they have a great fireworks show usually. And it's like coordinated between all the hotels. If you're up in the mountains, you could see the whole thing, from the mountains. It's beautiful, yeah.
Mm,
But yeah, it's a good time. I said, yeah, so you had a good holidays and the new year has been treating you right so far?
yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's always very strange, isn't it? Those first sort of week or two into a new year. It seems a long ascent, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It always feels like it should be more. Like it should be like more of a symbolic. I guess and then you think of all these parties and fireworks and people are staying up and toasting champagne. It's always like that Death Cab for Cutie song, right? The so this is the new year and I don't feel any different.
but
Uh
my big project for the end of 2025 was to read the Iliad in preparation for the triumph of Achilles. And I don't know why I've left it so long to read the Iliad. I mean,
it's a long read. It's a long
I
read.
mean,
Yeah.
I didn't have a classical education. I mean, I didn't have much of an education at all, actually. Certainly not as far as the Iliad is concerned. Have you read it?
I
Have you? Oh,
haven't,
no,
no.
I was going to say to myself, I'm not going to ask Andrew if he's read it. 'Cause
I haven't read the Iliad or the Odyssey, though I have had a plan for like the past year or two with a friend to cover them on the show. But
oh, that would be,
those,
yeah.
we have to plan that pretty far in advance and make sure we have enough time, because those big books. I did this when I did Magic Mountain with Maggie as well. It was just those huge books that are going to take a couple months to prepare for.
Oh,
I
that would be
just would like
really
to,
that would be really good. I mean, I'd really enjoy those because it was very heavy going. I mean,
yeah,
obviously everyone knows the ending, and there are all these battle scenes of bronze spears sort of piercing armor to the slightly to the left of the nipple, or slightly to the right of the nipple, or slightly below the nipple, and then the Greek hero warrior, they fall into the dust and darkness fills their eyes, and then it happens all over again. It just goes on and on and on. A sort of litany of warriors being sort of slayed. It's quite difficult to get through. And I couldn't really. I mean, this is like one of the foundation texts of Western literature, isn't it,
yeah.
the Iliad? And I couldn't really understand why. I thought, well, why don't really get. And then I saw that film F1 with Brad Pitt. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen it yet, no, but it looks like it's worth seeing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's had an awful lot of sort of marketing and things like that. And well, Brad Pitt plays this sort of racing driver called Sonny Haynes, and he's got this stock phrase which is "it's not about the money." And after a bit, you start thinking, well, what is it about?
Right.
Then you realise actually the film descends into a lot of films. They've got this. They've got sort of opening part, and then they sort of uh, change into what the real narrative is towards the middle and the end. And it was the immovable will of men, and
Right.
the film changed into that. And I suddenly put that against the Iliad, and I thought, oh, of course, it's it's all about the immovable will, the immovable male will, and that's what the Iliad is about.
Yeah.
So then I sort of understood it. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's for a lot of those the epic poem era, at least, we have to go back almost, a couple thousand years here. But that era, definitely, you have that kind of the symbolism was more important. The subtleties matter much more. It is interesting, and I know there's arguments, especially in the academic side of things. We talk about the Western literature. There's an argument that, it was just the only, half of the stuff that was written at these times got destroyed. There were just a few that survived. And, the Iliad and the Odyssey was one of the big ones. I remember
yeah,
studying English in college, Beowulf and some of that stuff from kind of once we move on from the Greek foundation to kind of, yeah, the Germanic foundation there towards the British foundation. And it's just like, yeah, I mean that kind of stuff. Like I've heard arguments even when you get into like kind of serious study about how parts of even Beowulf have been lost and we don't know, about that. And when you read through it, it does feel like that. Something like almost like a big chunk is missing in certain
yeah,
transitions.
yeah.
Could be just, how they did it back then. But
Well,
yeah,
I
I'm
think
not
the
that educated on it either. Yeah, it's one of my big blind spots is Greek
I think the
mythology.
I think the Iliad was composed before the invention of the Greek alphabet.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think so. It's sort of quite an astonishing thought, isn't it? And it sort of starts off with all these psychological character sketches. I mean, straight away there's this sort of argument between Agamemnon and Achilles, and then the sort of goddesses and gods come in, and they've all got their own particular sort of argumentative uh, thing going on. It's so there's that as well. It's a psychological portraiture, I suppose, which we sort of get. I've got a little section here. And Strife, the grief-causing goddess, looked on with joy, the only one of the gods who was there. All the others were sitting at home with no part in the fighting, at ease in their beautiful houses, built on the folds of Olympus, blaming their father Zeus for wanting to give the victory to the Trojans. But Zeus did not care. He drew away from the others and sat down apart, enjoying his splendor, looking out over Troy and the warships of the Achaeans, at the flash of bronze, at the killers and at the killed. So it's sort of entertainment
Yeah.
for the gods. It's sort of
Kind of
that's
the gods pulling their strings and then yeah, that's always interesting. I know, like I said, it's one of my big blind spots, so I have attempted several times to correct that. Robert Graves' kind of translation of a lot of the Greek myths, just so I could get because it's so important for literature to try and get a better understanding. And there's just so many characters, so many gods, there's so many little events that like matter to like the overall story of the gods. That yeah,
mm,
there's still just huge blind spots for me. I did the same thing with the Norse mythology. Uh, and that's a little easier because it's just less of it. There's just less of it, but still the same thing. There's so many characters that it just starts to blur after a while, and I'm like, I should really work on this. But this is part of it. But I'm glad you brought that up because this is it's something I want to. Because this book is called The Triumph of Achilles, but Achilles
yeah,
dies. Like Achilles dies. So it is deliberate, listeners. And before we get going on this today, I should just say welcome back to another episode of Heavy Board. And we are here joined again by friend, poet, writer, dare I say conservationist as well.
Conservationist.
Damon Moore is back with us, listeners. So, Damon, welcome back to
Yeah.
Heavy Board.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes. Conservationist. I suppose I would be a community property activist would possibly be my description. And
Yeah, I added that title for you, Damon. I was just like, so this guy likes historical buildings. This guy likes the historical
yeah,
landscapes out there,
yeah,
and he takes some steps to, however
yeah,
small, to ensure that
um,
they last and all of that.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's good. And again, the listeners that did that, go to what is it, Damon? What's the website for that anyway? Is silkmillstudios.com?
Yeah,
Dot
Siltmore
co dot uk?
Studios. Yeah, that's our arts project. It's an artist studio project, Siltmore Studios, over in Frome in Somerset. And Mayday Saxonvale is my property, is my sort of community activist, activist streak, and that's a big campaign to lead a community-led property development in Frome. So
And
that's
we will link that below as always, listeners. So go out there, go check it out.
nothing to do with the Iliad.
Nothing to do with it, but if you want to get to to get a little artist space on the
Yeah,
countryside of England,
yeah.
it's a great place to
Somerset.
check out.
Yeah, the folds of the hills and the wooded valleys of Somerset. Yeah. Um,
But the
yeah,
Triumph of
so
Achilles. No, please go on, Damon. Yeah. I
Triumph
just had to do
Achilles,
the
yes.
obligatory intro. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the Triumph of Achilles. It's a it's it's a petrifying collection, actually, Andrew. I found it. I mean, I'm really curious to hear what you've made of it because it's been a struggle for me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I mean, at first I thought, okay, it's called the Triumph of Achilles. I'll read the Iliad. I'll try and connect the poems in the Triumph of Achilles to Greek mythology. And then I realized that that didn't work with the collection. So I then started trying to connect the poems to something else. And I kind of then was in a sort of repeating cycle, going backwards and forwards, saying, okay, so no, right, it doesn't connect to anything in Greek mythology. So can I go back and connect it to something else? No, I'll have another go at trying to connect it to something in Greek mythology. And then in the end, I realized that actually they were more connected to a kind of mythological mind, which I think is which I think is the impulse, the psychic impulse underneath it all that Glick was bringing to it, and that's not expressed in any kind of structure
Yeah.
in any way. But I did find a lot of it. It's taken me really quite a long time to be unbaffled, and I'm still a bit baffled by some of it.
Yeah. I
I
felt,
do I do wonder what Glick talked about with her husbands in the evenings because
yeah. Yeah,
her
absolutely.
her
Because
mind just going. It's so zany. It's just going everywhere.
what they would call on the internet now, maybe a BPD art hoe or something is what they would say. Bipolar disorder art hoe. No, but I think maybe the start of that kind of sentiment. But yeah, I agree. I think there's something about this collection. And I'm glad we took a little bit of a break. And listeners know this is the continuing series here. We're going through Louise Glück, and we took a little bit of a break there towards the end of the year and the holiday seasons here. I think we needed it because we did through three books there. And these, I guess it depends how you read them, but usually these books are quite deep. A lot of Glick stuff. There's no shallowness to it. You're wading right into the deep waters there, so it does take its toll. You're tired. And this one too, because this one I think is a change
Mm.
from the previous three books.
Did you
Um,
have the same experience as I did? I mean, did you have to? Did you read it and think, well, what? Or go back to the beginning, start again, or I mean, how is it for you? Was it a difficult read, or?
There were several poems, particularly in the first section, where found myself rereading several times just because I was like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Like what is going, like as I'm trying to connect it through. And this one, she goes, there's probably some of the longest poems that Glick has ever written in this book so far, at least as we've gone through this.
Well, this book has, I think it's in the second section, isn't it? The first of her, what I would call her dark metaphysical poems, which are very long, extended poems. And the first one of them appears in this collection.
Yeah.
There's also another long one at the beginning called Metamorphosis.
Which is one of her famous poems from this collection.
Is it? Right.
Everybody,
I didn't.
Metamorphosis is just one of those things where, everybody's looking for something. For when you go through something like this, and that everybody has a couple poems from each book that are like pulled to, canonize the books and stuff. And I think that's
Right.
one of them.
Did the disconnection with the title, did that bother you at all? You know, this is an extraordinary collection of poetry with which has very little connection to Achilles. I mean, did that bother you?
Not in terms of the direct lines, it didn't really, I didn't think about it too much, but I enjoyed that it was, the triumph of Achilles again, like this Achilles dies. Like he dies doing
Well, no, he
this.
doesn't. That is in a I think it's called the Iliad and other sources, other classical sources that carry on the Trojan War. I mean, the Iliad it's really only about this sort of short, sort of few week period in the middle of the Trojan War, which ends with the death of Hector, tamer of horses, and he's killed by Achilles in front of the gates of Troy. And the triumph is in the ancient world. It's 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 when you won a battle and you come back and you celebrate that battle. But
That's depicted, I think, in that Brad Pitt movie, isn't it? The Troy from like
I'm
the 20 years
yeah,
ago.
I haven't I haven't seen I haven't
I
seen
haven't
that film.
seen it in years. I haven't seen it since it came out like 20 years ago or something, but uh
Yeah, I don't think it got very good
no,
reviews.
it didn't. And it's
And
not a
I,
great movie, but
yeah,
they just that battle scene at the end is depicted, in front of the gates of Troy where he's challenging them and the big epic between everyone's the two armies are just watching as like these guys go at it.
yeah,
Going off all
I
this though,
yeah,
I was thinking those quotes in the beginning. There's three quotes to start this book off from
yes,
1985. And the
yes,
one that I wanted to ask you about, because I thought it pointed to something that I think maybe this book is going towards. That
yeah,
last one where it says from Bruno, what is that, Bettelheim?
Bruno Bettelheim, yeah,
I'm not sure what it's from, but it says Joey was beginning to know good from evil, and whoever does that is committed to live a human existence on Earth. And I
yeah.
was like, And I wanted to ask you, Dem, is this book, at least one of the themes, is it a book that's about good versus evil? Kind of like those Greek tragedy, those Iliad and stuff.
Well,
Is it a
there are.
book?
If you die and you go to Hades, there are three places you can go. You can go to the Asphodel Meadows, which is for ordinary souls or people who've lived an ordinary life. So they haven't been particularly virtuous and they haven't been particularly evil. Um, if you're if you're if you're good or you've lived a very highly virtuous life, then I think you go to this area called Elysium. And then if you're very evil, then you go deep, 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 deep down into the into the underworld. Um, I've got the name of that. It's begins with T, and uh, that's the only reference. And there's only one poem in this collection really that deals with the soul in any kind of extended way, and that is a long extended poem. So I think the answer to that is no, as far as I can work out. And in fact, all of those quotes at the beginning, I didn't really um, you know, connect with at all.
It's interesting that you bring up the soul too, with this kind of this is her fourth book from 1985, listeners. But like, as we spent in those first three episodes, go listen to those, listeners. We talk about how Glick's obsession with the soul is very prevalent in all of this. But then, as you point out in this, there isn't as much in this book. This book is almost classic kind of poetry in terms of referencing the great works, referencing the Greek myths, and there's a little bit of Glick's, kind of contemporary 20th century style in there too as well. But like you said, yeah, not so much about the soul in that, especially compared to her first three books that we've gone into. But
Yeah, that's right.
what I
I
was
mean,
thinking, no, no, please.
no, no, after you, Andrew. Yeah.
What I was thinking in terms of that is I went through it and then I was like, oh man, is this book about good and evil? Or even just the process of, yeah, Joey was beginning to know good from evil,
No,
just the process of getting to make that
it's
distinction
not.
as
It's
you,
not. I cannot see any connection between that quote by Brynner Bedlam and Triumph of Achilles. That doesn't surprise me at all because this collection is all over the place. It's all over the place.
yeah.
And whoever does that is committed to live a human existence on Earth. What
I
must
wonder if it's almost cynical now that I'm rereading it in terms of making the distinction or even subtly determining between good and evil dooms you to a mortal life of, a human existence on Earth or something. But I don't know. I was just thinking about that particular distinction when you start to wonder, and there's a lot in this that we'll get to about changing your mind or worshiping the wrong gods, as she refers to it as, and kind of having, not, we won't have to go as far as saying epiphanies, but these kind of like small realizations as you mature in terms of
Hmm.
maybe it's not so much about faith. I don't, Glick isn't a type of writer that does that, but more so, I think just the realizing what you thought you knew wasn't the case, and that's a sense of maturity or a sense of growing up when you realize that what you thought was the case isn't actually the case. Like maybe there's a little
Yeah.
bit more sinister motivation to it. Maybe there's less sinister motivation to it. I
He
mean,
definitely
I
talks
don't
about
know.
that stretch of time
Right.
between the child and the adult as the child becomes the adult, and she switches roles in several of the poems.
That
Um,
too, there's kind of less children in this one. Uh,
well, I
they're
think the
not zero, but just
children
less
are human in
compared to
the
the
adult.
first three books. Yeah.
It's called Tartarus, the third region
Oh,
of Hades. Yeah. Um, and there is another one that's mentioned actually for lovers who never really find their find, find their true love as well. I don't know, it's just so huge. It's just also a huge, this collection. It is terrifying. Maybe we'd better just start off with it,
yeah.
and because maybe if you try and think about it in the round, it just it is just so difficult. But I'm not entirely convinced that Glick actually knew what this collection was about because there's quite a lot of prefiguring going on. She's prefiguring her next collection, which is Ararat, and this is the first of the father set of poems that she's going to write. The first one comes in straight after the opening poem, and I did mention in the last pod that she has this writer's block. And I think one of the reasons that she has these sort of extended writer's blocks is because her psychic mind is building something in this sort of fortress of the conscious mind behind the conscious mind about what she's going to be doing in the future. And it's she's a sort of, and there isn't much. She knows it's there, she can feel it's there, but it only comes out a little bit. So I think this is sort of why it seems very very disjointed. But I mean, it's not. It's you need to be able to trust a poet. Really, you need to be able to. There is that issue of trust, and it's okay not to trust a poet, but you need to know when you can trust them.
Right.
So, okay, you can be untrustworthy, and we'll come across her brilliant poem, An Untrustworthy Speaker, later on, but not in this collection. But you still need to know when to trust an untrustworthy speaker, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean,
And if the text doesn't make it obvious, then it becomes kind of quite challenging. Yeah, what you should believe and what you shouldn't. It's interesting. She even mentions that directly in some of the poems to that third section, which I want to get to. I pointed a few of them out here as we go through, but like where she just talks about the artist's life and the artist's mind. And it's almost like
mm,
you're saying where she is kind of almost depicting that struggle that you're describing there, that kind of,
mm,
and she compares it to pushing the rock up the hill with no point to it, right?
yeah,
Doomed to
mountain,
fail as you push this rock up the hill. But you must persist. And I was thinking maybe something like that is the more symbolic triumph of Achilles, the triumph of the artist, the triumph of the poet, pushing that rock up the hill and it leads to nothing, right? And it's doomed to fail anyway, but you persist. I don't know.
yeah,
We'll get to that too. But dude, this first poem, Mock Orange, I thought was just the fierceness, and we've talked about Glick's fierceness before. Listeners, go listen to those episodes. The fierceness was just off the page,
yeah,
and just the maturity, the mock orange, and I thought how well constructed it was too, where it starts someplace else, and then eventually gets down to this mock orange that we're talking about, and it's almost like a strange title at first, mock orange. But then when you get to the end of it, you realize how much work that title did to frame this entire thing so that she could end up in that place. And people that write poems, maybe she probably titled this after she wrote it, but still, that's a way to help your work.
So this is her most famous poem, right? Mock Orange.
Could
Me,
be.
for me, as far as I can work out, it is her most famous poem.
Yeah.
We could spend the whole of this pod talking about this poem, and we could spend the next pod talking about this poem. That is how,
And it has all of the stuff. We'll read it in a minute here. It has all of the stuff that Glick usually has in it. There's that little bit of relationship tension. There's that little bit of this kind of suspicion of love, suspicion of romantic, will or motivation. There's this kind of just that typical kind of Glick is very suspicious about love and romance. And we've speculated about maybe why that is, listeners, but of course it's all only speculation. But yeah, let's read it and then we'll go into it here.
yeah,
Mock orange. It is not the moon, I tell you. It is these flowers lighting the yard. I hate them. I hate them as I hate sex. The man's mouth sealing my mouth, the man's paralyzing body, and the cry that always escapes, the low, humiliating premise of union. In my mind tonight, I hear the question and pursuing answer, fused in one sound that mounts and mounts and then is split into the old selves, the tired antagonisms. Do you see? We were made fools of, and the scent of mock orange drifts through the window. How can I rest? How can I be content when there is still that odor in the world? So we get
yeah,
this place where it starts. It is not the moon, I tell you. The eye, we can assume, not necessarily the poet, but the eye is these flowers lighting the yard. And we don't even know what's coming up here until we get like mock orange, I point out, isn't even brought into the poem until the last couple of lines here. So we have the poem going, 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 and there's these M dashes that cut off those second and third stanzas kind of short. Uh, yeah, I just beautifully constructed. Obviously, the lines are great. But I was just
so
so
we've
impressed. No, please.
we've touched on Blake's use of the persona, haven't we? But this is when it gets really serious. So, who is the speaker of this poem? Do you think, Andrew?
Well, I I guess I would hesitate to say Glick, but I mean, for the most part, I think it's probably some vague variation of the poet. Yeah. Definitely female, considering the man is sealing my mouth, the man's paralyzing body. So we can assume it's from the woman's point of view.
But she puts this at the front of the collection.
Yeah,
You could say this is like an end of relationship poem
so
set,
many are. Yeah.
set. But why would she put it at the start? Does it make sense?
Yeah, my in terms of theming, I don't know if I have a good answer for that, but in terms of just like a strong poem to start off a collection, it's very strong. And like I said, it's very fierce. Like when I read it, I was, reading this a few times to do this. I was going through the first read and I was doing this, just that first page, because I thought about that quote a little bit. I wrote a note. I was like, I should ask Damon about this good and evil quote and blah, blah, blah in the beginning. And then I turned the
Yeah, I'm
page
sorry.
and went into
Sorry,
that.
I wasn't very
Oh, no,
helpful.
no, 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 no. It's just interesting thing to go into. And then I turned the page and I went into this first poem and I was like, whew, my God, what a strong poem. Just like that fierceness, that biting fierceness that Glick has kind of made her own in these first couple collections is there. It's fierce. It's beautifully constructed. Uh, the sexual and the hatred, the scent at the end, very well done poem. And again, I said before we started, the title's doing a lot of work to make us care about that mock orange scent at the end.
Mm.
Um,
So, I mean, in the discourse generally, I would say, including criticism and what you read online and things, I think that it is taken as an anti-romantic poem. It is assumed, more or less, that it is the poet who is the speaker, possibly based on personal experience. People, people respond to it who have had expectations of a wonderful love affair or a romantic sort of episode in their lives, and it's ended badly. But I'm not convinced. We know that she's using persona, and I looked up the difference between persona and poetic persona, and this is this is what the this is what Wikipedia says. Persona poetry is poetry that is written from the perspective of a persona that a poet creates who is the speaker of the poem. Okay, so that's our first question. Is this Louise Glück speaking, the poet, or is this some other version of her, a persona or a mask, to use its real meaning, that she's wearing in order to speak this poem? That's our that's our opening question.
yeah,
So,
it's difficult to say. Obviously, there's a tendency in scholarship to, at least I was trained to, you want to avoid leaning too heavily on, oh, it's the poet speaking directly. It's
mm,
Glick doing it. So it's a little more complicated than that, a little more subtle than that. And as somebody, Damon and I both write poems, sometimes you write something, it's not necessarily you, going through that
mm,
just felt like you wanted to explore this or
mm,
just felt right or whatever it is. So
yeah.
so yes and no, right? There's parts of the poet clearly in it, but then also they're trying to separate themselves a little bit because it's very difficult to write about yourself. Well, maybe some people don't find it so difficult.
I mean,
But
for
no.
for a long time, when I say a long time, I mean for after reading this collection for after my initial reading, that is what I considered to be the case. I considered it to be this, and when you hear her read it, I looked at a video of her reading it, and it just seems to fit with her
Yes.
persona on stage as she's doing a reading. It seems to be she is telling you this one to one. Right, sit up and listen to this poem. It's called Mock Orange. There's a lot in it about how I feel about different things. Pay attention, and that is kind of like it's got that force, hasn't it? As you said, it's sort of almost violent language.
Yeah. It feels that way when you're reading it. So she's so good at that, like being able to capture, making it feel violent without even using some of the more direct, although there's references to killing and things like that, of course, but
I
not in
did have
this
a bit of
poem.
I did have a bit of look around, and of course, John Berryman is a standout example of a poet who uses a persona, as you know. I came across his Dream Song 14 actually,
There you
Andrew.
go. The title poem of this podcast. Yeah.
My friends is boring. We must not say so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was pleased to find that. After all the sky flashes and the great sea yearns, we ourselves flash and yearn. And moreover, my mother told me as a boy, repeatingly, ever to confess you're bored means you have no inner resources. I conclude now, I have no inner resources because I am
People were.
heavy bored.
Yeah.
It's terrific, isn't it? He read that out to a sort of auditorium of students, and he he said he only ever published in serious magazines. I suppose you could say that at that time. But he said because he was a friend of the editor, it was published in Harper's Bazaar, and the editor told him afterwards that was the only poem that they had ever had any correspondence about with any of their readers. Um, but it's pretty heartbreaking listening to John Berryman read, really, because he seems like a man who's sort of trapped without a persona, or else he's trapped in one that he's created in order to escape being trapped.
Yeah.
And so there are problems with these personas. You don't know whether the persona is actually operative at the point that the poet intends.
Yeah.
And in dream songs, often, as in this Dream Song 14, when I just read out, is that operative? Is that the persona operative? I mean, it just doesn't seem to be. I'm not sure why Berryman adopted this minstrel. He adopted a minstrel persona for Dream Songs, isn't he? I mean, is that because he wanted to present a character who was both black and white? Is that why he did it?
There's all kinds of theories onto why he did it, and he would always say that there were three personas in those poems. There's Mr. Bones, there's Henry, and there's himself, basically. And there's
Mm.
these kinds of he maintains that he is not Henry and he is not Mr. Bones, but like there are parts like you're mentioning where, you know, my mother said, I'm heavy bored. He's not saying, and I think he says even that later, Henry bores me, right, with his gripes,
Yeah, he
as
said.
bad as Achilles.
Yeah, he said here, I will say though that from the first song, the personality of the poet diminishes itself into the personality of Henry, and that in the last song, the personality of Henry diminishes itself into the personality of the poet. Otherwise, the poem, despite its large cast of characters, is entirely about a man named Henry, not me.
Right. Yeah,
And
yeah.
that seems
Very
to sort of
poet
chime,
answer. Yeah.
that sort of chimes with me with the triumph of Achilles, because there is a big set of characters in the collection, isn't there?
Yeah.
And and I but you don't know. The problem with this collection for me is you never really know when the persona is there and when the persona isn't there. And if the persona is there, you don't know whose persona it is. Who does it belong to? Sometimes it shifts really, really quickly
Yeah.
from one person to another, and it's never it's really difficult to tell. And with Mock Orange, it is. So I've got the main candidates for the persona who is presenting this poem. So the first one is Glick herself. The second one is an alter ego of Glick, which is different from persona in that an alter ego is an alternative personality, distinct from a person's normal personality. So it would be an alternative personality of Glick. So that could be this other, as I say, this sort of psychic part of her, which is hidden even from her. So it could be that. It could be Achilles. Achilles had a complicated sex life, and well, we don't know what his sex life was about at all, but he had a complicated love life. And um, there's been much speculation about homoeroticism in his world. Um, it could be Helen, who's speaking this, Helen of Troy. It could be Aphrodite, the goddess of passion or lust, not really love. And she allied herself with the Trojans because she became a special god of Paris, because Paris chose her um, above the other goddesses. It could be Briseis, who is Achilles, described as Achilles' serving woman, who he had the great falling out with Agamemnon, because Agamemnon took Briseis for himself, and Achilles then went off in a massive sulk throughout the whole of the Iliad and said, well, I'm not going to fight anymore because you did this and you dishonored me.
I
And
also no, please.
lastly, it could be Glick's mother, or even her father as Achilles. So that's quite a list, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And I guess to eliminate, or we could try to eliminate, we could start to be like, okay, where do we see it? What's making us think? What's the text on the page hinting at, or what are we getting out of it for, which one of those would we
Well,
settle on or something?
I suppose this. I mean, you could say that there is a reference to rape, couldn't you? Here, I hate them as I hate sex. The man's mouth sealing my body, the man's paralyzing body, and the cry that always escapes. And
There's a very feminist. I've been thinking about this recently, Damon, as I see this stuff and people quoting Betty Friedan and stuff still all the time, where I'm just thinking, I was like, how much of the kind of feminism of that second, third wave from like the 70s, 60s on, how much of it is women hating being a woman? Like there's this, especially Glick is one of those ones where this the way that the sex is written about in those first couple stanzas, it's about this desire, but also the hatred even desiring it and then even enjoying it. There's like
mm,
I mean, this is the big, like, the person who fucks and then gets fucked, right? Like there's this kind of relationship implied in that. And there's just this feminist kind of way of thinking about it where it's, I resent that I'm the one that is always getting fucked, that I can only get fucked and never fuck, right? Like, and that's a crude way to put it, I get it, but it's just kind of that, I don't know, just this kind of the hatred of like your natural body, and in this, and not so much an eating disorder way, although there's plenty of that in Glick, right? But
yeah,
like
yeah.
in this kind of sexual expression way, I hate them. I hate them as I hate sex. The man's mouth sealing my mouth, the man's paralyzing body, I guess his weight or something on top of her, and the cry that always escapes, the low, humiliating premise of union. The humiliating premise of union. Like it's always this kind of
Mm.
suspicion of sex and love. And like it's always this kind of suspicion, this kind of, I don't want to, maybe hatred of it or resentment of it, or
Well,
I don't know.
Theseus, who was Achilles' mother, she was married against her will. She was a sea.
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, You will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavybore.